Obviously, our life is full of issues. Personally, there are various mental challenges one has been going through, and also outwardly, economically, politically, everything is in disorder beneath the superficial order. When man is really sensitive, it's not difficult to perceive all of those. And for this occasion, we are not talking about any ideas, because there are already enough ideas in society. People are pursuing various ideas, thoughts, but nothing is solved. The chaos is always there. It seems to be more and more urgent for one to find out what is actually happening in life. Not through words, not through theories or ideas, but one can perceive inwardly to find out actually, exactly what is going on in the world. The inner world, also the world outwardly, because it's the same thing, right? People's activities are dominated by the mind, by their inner processes. And what they have done, they also have an influence on the mind. So it is rather important and then necessary for one to dig into the psyche, to perceive what is going on there. They are not words. They are not explanations. You can't depend on anybody to tell you, because what you are being told are merely words, ideas. Rather, you must find out for yourself, to perceive, to give full attention to everything around you. That's to say, the mind must be highly alert and sensitive to everything around it. In that diligent observation, the mind can come upon what is actually taking place. And that insight will probably dissolve all the issues. But you need to find out. So in this occasion, the speaker does not want to persuade you or teach you anything. He has nothing to teach. But rather, we can start this journey together to find out, to explore. Perhaps during this journey, the mind can come upon lots of things beyond the verse. Is it possible for one to live a life without any conflict, without any contradictions? This whole world is in contradiction with each other. Almost everybody is against each other, right? Everyone has their own opinions, preferences, likes or dislikes. It is impossible for two persons to have the same preferences. seeing this superficial phenomenon, can one perceive and find out what is actually taking place on the mind? When one is willing to do that, that's to observe oneself completely. One can understand oneself. Therefore, one can understand everybody on this planet. Because the nature of mind, not your mind, my mind, the nature of mind is shared by each human being on this planet, regardless of language, people, or skin. Everybody's mind is dominated by the same principle. But can one compound it? That's to say, one must be diligent to observe oneself completely. To perceive that principle of the neuron cells. It is not something mysterious. It is not something spiritual. It is nothing about religion. It is very, very objective. But one must be willing to do that. Because most people tend to look outwardly. There are various things people can look for. Ideas, theories, philosophies, various cunning explanations, views. But they are all verse. Verse are never the thing. Right? Verse are verse. Here we are also using verse. But the verse are not the thing. The verse may point to the thing, but the verse are never the thing. So can one compound the thing? Not depend on the verse. Verse are very deceptive, can easily manipulate the mind, right? The verse can make the mind very cunning, creating various sentences, statements. But the thing is never the verse. We tend to depend on verse, then we stop to see the thing. Therefore, we are trapped in verse, aren't we? But can we pay attention to the verse and see the thing without being trapped in verse? That's the thing we need to do in the session together, because the speaker is using verse, and everybody must be in full attention to not trapped in verse, but rather using this verse as a mirror, and everybody must to perceive the actual thing, to find out what is actually taking place on the mind. So that's why truth is not speakable. One must perceive it. Truth is there. Truth is the principle of the neuron cells. Truth is the nature of the human consciousness. That's why it's very urgent for each of us to give full attention to the verse without being trapped in verse. The whole world, the society, is based on thoughts, not on truth. Our way of living is also based on thought for most people on this planet. But truth is not thoughts. Only when the mind is not trapped in thoughts, one can compound what is true. We don't condemn thoughts. We don't say thoughts are wrong. But we are observing it, observing the whole movement of thoughts, which are templates in the mind. Thoughts are divisive, aren't they? Everybody has their own thoughts, opinions, ideas. And everybody is holding onto their own ideas, thoughts. Therefore, thoughts breed division. And interestingly, this whole world is worshipping thoughts. We don't say thoughts are wrong, but when one is worshipping thoughts, perhaps there's something wrong there. Technologically, we use thoughts to create a wonderful technology, right? But why do we also hold on to thoughts psychologically? As long as one is holding on to something, which is a thought, there must be contradiction. There must be conflict. And when the mind is holding onto the thoughts, the mind cannot see the truth. The mind is trapped in its own personal experiences, views. So is that possible for one to perceive the limitation of thoughts? Again, we say that we don't condemn thoughts, but it is very important for one to perceive the limitation with thoughts. It seems necessary to use thoughts to develop knowledge, technology. But why do people hold on to thoughts psychologically? The speaker said that it is unnecessary to hold on to thoughts psychologically. But can we come upon and find out why are most people doing that? For a sense of security, people are holding on to some thoughts, ideas, for a sense of security. Is that so? But what is the consequence of that behavior? I mean, psychological behavior. Conflict, contradiction. And when that thought is being challenged, there's violence immediately. So obviously, one is not secure, right? Because when a thought is being challenged, one feels immediately insecure. It means that one's security is based on thought. But thought is never something stable, isn't it? The thought is always changing. When the mind is based on something unstable, for security, it is always vulnerable, isn't it? Perhaps we need to find out what is security psychologically. In this world, there's a need for psychological security. So there are various books about theories, ideas, in the hope to give people security psychologically. But what is security psychologically? Why does one crave security psychologically? The mind is always want to cling to something, hold on to something, or grasp something. Perhaps there's no psychological security at all. There's no such thing at all. People may think the mind may have an illusion that I can grasp something for security. But when the mind has grasped something, issues immediately pop up. Can the mind not grasp anything? Just merely stay what is, without grasping anything. Please do it and find out what will happen. Can the mind stay with what is without grasping anything? Psychologically, there's no permanency. That's a fact, but can one see the fact now, perceive it? There's no permanency psychologically. But when the mind is grasping something or holding on to something, it is looking for permanency. But the truth is that there's no permanency psychologically. But can one perceive it? Can one feel this statement is true? When there's no permanency psychologically, when the mind is looking for it, it is against the truth. Therefore, it can never find it. But when the mind is still looking for it, the permanency, the security, there's only struggle for nothing, isn't it? Because you can't find it. The truth is that there's no permanency, there's no security psychologically. Physically, we do need that. Housing, foods, clothes, and so on, right? The physical security, the security, we do need it. But there's no such thing called security psychologically. As we said, one must be able to perceive the fact that there's no permanency or security psychologically. Therefore, any endeavor to look for psychological security is only in vain, bringing about struggle and nothing else. So you see, they are not words, they are not theories. One must perceive it, the truth. psychologically, the mind is always fluctuating, changing. Nothing is permanent. And can one stay with that fact, not running away from it? When the mind is seeking security psychologically, holding on to something or grasping something, it is running away from the truth, isn't it? And there's only struggle for nothing. Perhaps all our mental challenges or problems come from this. Looking for something that don't exist. Therefore, there's frustration. There's agony. Or desperation. That's why, it is so urgent and very important for everybody to come upon the psychological facts, which are truth. And psychologically, one live with facts. Can one do that? Not with ideas or opinions or philosophies, but with facts. That's to say, one must be diligent and careful and sensitive to perceive those facts by observing oneself completely. When one is living with facts psychologically, thoughts stay in the right place. But when one is not doing that, one's life is taken over by thoughts. Thoughts are very convenient, right? They are carried by verse, and one can easily find satisfaction in thoughts without thinking anything deeper. But to come upon the facts, one must observe. One must put aside the convenience of thoughts. Most of us seem to be very easy to think because we think so much in every way of our life, every corner of our living. But to perceive is not to think. To perceive is to observe. is to observe ourselves as they are, as it is. When we think, we always tend to do something about something. But when we observe ourselves, the whole neuron system, something is there. So perceiving is free of efforts. But think is out of efforts. When we think, we make efforts. But when we perceive, we don't make any efforts. Is that clear? Because everything is there. When we perceive, everything just naturally come into the consciousness, right? But when we think, we make efforts, we concentrate on something, and therefore get trapped there. Maybe we can go a little bit slowly here. When the mind is thinking, the mind is concentrating on something, isn't it? In that concentration, more and more details pop up. And when the mind is concentrating on something, it cannot see the total part of the whole, right? Because concentration is always partial, fragmented, right? Therefore, the mind can be easily trapped in the fragment, losing the connection with the whole. So that's the result of the efforts of the mind. But when the mind makes no efforts, it perceives the whole. Therefore, something is there. Therefore, it can easily, naturally come into the consciousness. Can the mind perceive? And when we do our work, we need to think. Concentration is necessary in your work, right? But besides that, psychologically, can the mind perceive, not concentrate? That's to say, can the mind have no efforts psychologically? When the mind is making psychological efforts, it's looking for something permanent. It's looking for something can bring one the security. As we said earlier, it is in vain because it is looking for something that never exists. Therefore, the efforts psychologically only bring about struggle, struggle, struggle. Bring in various challenges, problems, endlessly. All of those is against the truth. The truth is that there's no psychological security. Therefore, stop looking for it. When one is no longer looking for it, one is free. But when one is looking for the thing that does not exist, one is trapped. Right? You see, so many people are trapped in their own ideas, their own issues. The more they make efforts to look for it, the more problems they will encounter. The mind is in illusion, looking for something that does not exist. It's an illusion, isn't it? But when the mind is seeing the facts, it dispels all the illusions. When I say this, and then when I'm actually doing it, acting upon it, I no longer hold on to anything psychologically. Therefore, I'm in no contradiction with everybody on this planet. Because I see the fact, I see the truth is that as long as the mind is holding on to something, to look for something that does not exist, the security, that state of holding on to something or clinging to something must inevitably bring about struggle, suffering, contradiction, conflict. Not only with oneself, but also with everybody else. When I see that, I stop holding on to anything. I just stay with what is. Stay with this uncertainty. Stay with this impermanency. And there's more to discover than what the speaker can see. So that's why you see, truth pacifies aggression, dissolve argument. Right? When man is holding on to nothing, psychologically, there's no aggression, there's no argument. There's nothing to defend psychologically. But when one is holding on to the ideas, opinions, they are always defending it. Therefore, you see, in our daily life, there are endless arguments because there are so many self-defendants, right? It is unnecessary. It is merely the dissipation of energy for nothing, right? Our life is wasted in that, not worth it, right? So can one act upon the truth? It means that I don't imitate anybody. I know that people around me have their own opinions, holding on to something, but I don't do that. Can one not imitate anybody? You know, people tend to easily copy each other, learn from each other. But when one is acting upon the truth, one is not imitating. One is applying the facts to one's life. So when one is doing that, I mean, holding on to nothing psychologically, one is really alone psychologically. One is no longer following anybody because one is applying what one has found out to one's living. One is light to oneself. And when you are really being that, you are making a difference to the world. Right? Everyone around you is arguing, but you don't. You see the futility of it. Psychologically, you don't belong to any group, any community. You are alone psychologically because you are seeing what is true and applying that to your life. You see, when the mind does not compete at all, no one in the world can compete with you. It's the same thing, right? When you are holding on to nothing, psychologically, you are no longer competing with anybody. When people have their own ideas, views, and they are defending it, every time they speak or talk, there's always some kind of a micro fight, right? But when you have nothing psychologically to defend, nobody competes with you. And when you are being that, you become the mirror of everybody, right? That's why, you see, it is, as the speaker has said quite a few times today, it is very urgent for one to compound the facts and live with them. When one has nothing psychologically, there's nothing to defend, there's nothing to hold on to, there's humility. Observation demands humility. When the mind is holding on to something, there's self-importance, right? When the mind has this self-importance, it always flexes muscles in various ways. Ultimately, the exhibitionism is everywhere. Isn't it the same process of the inner self-importance? Like when one flexes one's muscles, one will inevitably encounter issues that dissipate one's energy and make one senile. This action does not agree with truth, and therefore it only leads to perishing soon. What is behind this prevalent self-importance is over-suffering. The contradiction, the conflict, due to this self-importance, make us disconnected and suffer separately. And when there's a self-importance, there's no observation, right? Because the mind isn't aware of that. To be able to aware of this self-importance and all the things that are going on in the mind, one must be humble. That's to say, really honest with oneself. When there's self-importance, one cannot be honest with oneself. Right? Because the mind thinks it is something. But actually, psychologically, we are all nothing. Right? Can one live a life being nothing psychologically? One can be anything outwardly, it doesn't matter. But can one be nothing psychologically? Anything that exists psychologically must be an illusion. Mustn't it? Like the security of various problems are created out of nothing. And we forget it's nothing. And we are trapped in something. That actually don't exist. So in the next 40 minutes, you can ask anything you want. I think.
I have questions.
Oh,
I don't know if I have questions.
If you would like to speak, you can use this microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but I was saying that I don't think I have questions.
Good.
or anything you want to communicate. But why do you come here? For example, the speaker asking you, why do you come here?
Yeah, I associate this with meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a meditation session mixed with a talk.
Yes.
And at the moment, well, not for a long time, I've been trying to get into meditation, and I've been doing it.
Yes, good.
By myself. Then I thought it would be a good thing doing it in a group and guided. Yeah, that's it.
How about you?
Since I was 20, I had the same philosophy. I don't know how to say this. And then I googled it, and
How? If you speak to it, it will be recorded in the camera. Would you like that, or?
oh, Jesus. Okay.
Joyce, you can hold it.
I can hold it, or do you mind, or would you like to be recorded?
I don't know.
Put aside, Joyce.
You can.
Okay. Just, madam,
Yeah.
just speak what you want, please.
Yeah.
Forget that. Forget that.
I'll mute it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Me and my best friend had the same ideas, and then we googled it, and then we realized Taoism has the similar principles about how they see life. And then I started to learn about Taoism, and then I wanted to do learn more. It's just.
So you have some knowledge of Tao previously.
Just a very little.
Oh,
For me, it's very similar to. I consume a lot of Sam Harris content. He's a podcaster, neuroscientist slash philosopher slash, and he talks a lot about consciousness, and he has this app for practicing guided meditation. He talks a lot about vipassana, and so it's more like Tibetan Buddhism oriented.
Yeah, I see.
But then I can see a clear parallel of the core ideas.
Yeah.
And I think those are very helpful
Okay.
in general, ideas that I wish I could incorporate in my life more often or always. But it is a path that's challenging to stay with it and not get so often distracted by clinging to this idea,
Yes.
trying to be right, trying to
Yeah.
this constant struggle,
Yeah.
and it's all absolutely pointless and
Yeah, of course.
has been draining me completely, and it doesn't bring about any benefits.
No. Yeah.
It's just a waste.
Yes. So, the real challenge, actually the biggest challenge, is to stay silent. So when one is really respond to that, then any other challenge won't be an issue. But most people don't respond to this biggest challenge, as to kind of mind be silent. Then one has various issues and problems, and one is inundated with all of them. But all those issues are created out of nothing. When the mind is silent, there's nothing. But when the mind is not, there's always something to fight against or to hold on to, you see, this constant struggle. And it seems to be speaker that most people fail to see the importance of being silent inwardly. They are always leading with the issues which they regard as an issue. But they don't really find out the true issue to all those endless secondary issues. Indeed, we are all, as human beings, are trapped in by the secondary issues. Without dealing with the fundamental ones, the secondary issues become tremendously important. And the mind is busy with that. And that's why you see most people's life is based on these superficialities. And they're trapped in the superficialities. They don't go or penetrate the superficialities. The fundamental issues like the root. Dig out the root, all the issues will be gone. But most people are dealing with the leaves. There are numerous leaves. So that's why the whole life is wasted. In dealing with in these issues. It has become very important for and when earnest and serious, to respond to the fundamental issues instantly. That's to end this psychological struggle completely. Right. So that's one of the issues we are all facing. Why those secondary issues feel so true, right? What is taking place in the mind when the secondary issues become so true to life? Is that the same process that human beings are worshiping thoughts? And when we are holding onto something, which must be thoughts, right? And that something becomes so true. It becomes stagnant. And the mind is trapped in stagnancy, an illusion of permanency, the result of grasping, holding. But the mind is always in a changing state. It's like a flowing water all the time. When there's something fixed inside the flowing water, there must be conflict or resistance. Grasping something is against the flowing water. When the mind grasps something, it feels something secure at that time, which is an illusion of the thought processes. But the flowing water, which is the whole dynamics of the neuron cells, will have conflict with the thing that one is holding on to. Therefore, more issues pop up. Unless one willingly let go of everything. This holding on something and have to let go something is this, or embodies this constant struggle. Grasp, let go, grasp, let go. Can the mind merely observe without grasping anything? Just observe. Observe patiently. observe without any direction. Observe without seeking anything. In that observation, the mind perceives the dynamics of the mind itself, actually, and stay with it. Can one do that? It demands silence, and I mean the inner silence. When the mind is very busy, as most people are in this world, the mind is trapped in numerous reactions. In the chain of the reactions, the mind cannot observe. So that's why it is very necessary for the mind to be free from all reactions. In the chain of the reactions, the mind is always grasping. So one must deal with various reactions by observing them completely. When one is observing the reaction completely, means that it perceives what is taking place when there's reaction. Then everything is dissolved. When there's no reaction, the mind grasps nothing. It's the same process. So can one observe, and in that complete observation, all the reactions are dissolved. Where there is reaction, the mind is not silent.
How do you stay silent when you talk to people? Because my mind can stay silent when I'm observing, but when I have to talk, it's just not.
So we first need to be aware or to examine what is taking place when we are talking to somebody or talking with somebody. When we are talking with somebody, what are taking place there? The mind is immediately trapped in verse, isn't it? So when one is talking with somebody else, the mind is immediately trapped in verse, isn't it? Because most people are speaking so fast with so many subtle expressions. Perhaps we have the wrong way of speaking. When the mind depends on verse, the speaking becomes automatic, very fast-paced, with a lot of content. In that way of speaking, the mind is already trapped in reactions. In the reaction to verse, then how can we observe? Right? So we just observe now. It seems that most people on this planet cannot speak properly. They are speaking out of numerous accumulated reactions. With a lot of subtle content. We think that's normal. Perhaps it's not, it's abnormal. Most people become like that. When one is speaking, can one observe oneself? When one is doing that, perhaps speaking becomes something different. Pay attention to each word we use. That demands a mind that is silent, that is free of reactions. Then it can speak properly, using the right verse expressions to achieve the necessary communication. Not chatting all the time. Most people are chatting for nothing. They just rely on verse for some kind of stimulation.
Cico, I think that question touched upon a very fundamental principle in Tao Te Ching. So in Tao Te Ching, there is sometimes I speak Chinese to Cico and he will translate because my English is not that fluent. So one principle is 致虚极守静笃, to stay quiet, silent to the utmost. That's one principle.
Yes.
But there is another one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that responds to the question. The first is 道常无为而无不为, non-doing and doing. So it's not that one keeps silent always, but when you speak, when you use thoughts, like today's session, we use thoughts to observe reactions, to eliminate reactions in the mind, to facilitate the mind to come upon the true silence. 还有一句话就是说，常有欲以观其教，常无欲以观其妙。
I understand, but I think it's too much for.
That's a very key principle to respond to that question.
Okay, so I will respond in this way. Silence is a quality of the mind. It's not something you can imagine. Silence is a quality of the mind. It does not mean that it speaks nothing, but rather the mind is very clear, very decisive. The mind is not chattering. It can speak properly. It can act properly. But still, the mind is silent. It's not restless. And we can see the mind is restful. If we can use that word in that way. The mind is not restless, it's restful. It is silent, but it is full of energy. But you can't imagine it, because of the very imagination may bring about misunderstanding. When the mind is really silent, when the mind is able to speak properly, it may find that it is rather challenging to talk to various people, because their mind is so fast, because full of reactions, churning out content in less no time. So it can immediately drag myself into their reactions. I see it's very tricky and dangerous. I must be very cautious. If you any misunderstanding, please tell me or ask me.
It's not yet finished, so I don't know yet.
Okay. It means that the mind observe when it behaves, observe what it speaks, what it thinks. That observation, which is perceiving, bring about the order of the mind. Functionally, as a person in society, I speak in my work. I speak to people, like in a supermarket, for example. But psychologically, can the mind be free of any verse? When the mind is holding on to some idea or theory, it is holding on to some verse, isn't it? But can the mind be free of verse psychologically? Well, you can still speak when you work, when you do other things. Yes? Do it, please, to find out what will happen. To speak when you have to speak. But when you really alone, when you really stay silent inwardly, there are no words. Because when the mind is chattering, is that because the mind is trapped in verse, in the reaction to the verse? That's why when mind is alone, the mind is still chattering, which is the dissipation of energy for nothing. Only bring about more problems, fear, anxiety, and issues. Can the mind psychologically be free of all those things. There's only feeling. Feel the sensation. Or hear, listen, smell. That's the whole activities of the neuron cells. They are not averse. They are there. Again, back to today's session, we have explored words are never the thing. It's the same principle. When the mind is holding on some verse psychologically, it creates something. The verse. It feels it exists. The verse exists. But the verse are not the actual thing. So that's why when the mind is trapped in by a verse, it gets trapped in the world created by a verse. Right.
I have a friend who says the same. He says we think compulsively. So it's like talking to ourselves all the time and we don't hear anybody else what they have to say or the word or what we have to feel because we talk all the time in our head.
That's it. Come in that process completely. By giving full attention to everything. When the mind is talking to itself, through the verse, it makes efforts. Though it becomes rather automatic, but actually it is making efforts. The efforts become automatic, right? But when the mind is really perceive, feel, observe, there are no efforts. So can the mind end that efforts chain? That's to observe. Just do nothing. Just observe. The neuron cells have their intelligence to dissolve all those things. We don't need to do anything else. What we just do is nothing. Just do nothing. But when the mind is trapped in reaction, the reaction always pushes the mind to do something. Right? So can the mind just observe, behold, and see what will happen? It demands tremendous patience. When the mind is in reaction, it is not patient. Silence is patience, right? So can that patience take place? That demands tremendous observation. See various illusions, various traps of patterns of thinking. when it's really doing that, and upon and living and upon and acting upon this inner silence, the whole life is meditation. In that silence, there's clarity. Clarity about everything. Otherwise, the mind is always confused. Especially in a society which is merely based on thoughts, there's endless confusion. Thoughts can never bring clarity, never. As we said today in the session, thoughts only bring about division, contradiction, conflict. When the mind is holding on to it. And also thoughts are carried by verse. So can one live a life where thoughts, language, I mean the verse, can stay in the right place? In our work, in our life, in society, they have a place, obviously. But here, psychologically, there are no place for them. But you see, most people tend to fill a mind with various things for a sense of fulfillment. And the consequence of that is troubles, sufferings. So can one live a life in society, in the world, without filling the mind? It might be challenging, but it is very necessary and urgent to respond to that. As we said earlier, that's the biggest challenge, to keep the mind empty. But when one can do that, any other challenge wouldn't be an issue, because that's the biggest challenge, right, of all time. I think that's enough for today's session.